It was a bright and beautiful afternoon, the kind of day that made everything feel peaceful. The sun was shining, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and birds chirped happily in the trees. In the middle of a small but lively park, a little girl named Lily sat in her wheelchair, watching the world around her with wide, curious eyes. Lily was 7 years old, and despite her physical challenges, she had a bright spirit. She had been born with a condition that made it difficult for her to walk, but that never stopped her from enjoying life. She loved going to the park, feeling the fresh air on her face, and watching the other kids play. But most of all, she loved spending time with her small, fluffy service dog, Buddy. Buddy was not just any dog. He was Lily's best friend. He had been trained to help her in small but important ways, like picking up things she dropped and giving her comfort when she felt anxious. He had golden fur, big brown eyes, and a wagging tail that never seemed to stop moving. Everywhere Lily went, Buddy was right there beside her, as if he knew his job was to protect and love her. Lily's mother, Maria, sat on a bench nearby, watching her daughter with a warm smile. Maria worked hard every day to make sure Lily had everything she needed. She had raised her with love and patience, teaching her that she was just as strong and capable as anyone else. As Maria sat there, an elderly woman next to her started a friendly conversation. "Your daughter is adorable," the woman said kindly. "And that little dog of hers is quite a sweetheart." Maria chuckled. "Oh, Buddy is more than just a sweetheart. He's her little guardian. She wouldn't trade him for the world." Meanwhile, Lily giggled as Buddy tried to chase a butterfly, his tiny paws bouncing off the soft grass. She clapped her hands, excited to see the butterfly land on a nearby flower. Moments like these made her forget about the things she couldn't do. Right now, she wasn't a girl in a wheelchair. She was just a kid having fun. Other children ran past her, laughing and playing, but Lily didn't mind not joining in. She had her own way of enjoying the day, and as long as Buddy was with her, she was happy. The park was full of families, couples, and elderly people enjoying the pleasant weather. Some were jogging, some were walking their dogs, and others were simply sitting on benches, soaking in the sunshine. It was a place where people came to relax and be happy. Lily looked up at her mother and waved. Maria waved back with a smile. Everything felt perfect. But just as Lily turned her attention back to Buddy, something changed. A shadow moved toward them, and an unfamiliar voice spoke. It wasn't friendly. And just like that, their peaceful afternoon was about to take a very different turn. Lily was still smiling as she watched Buddy sniff around the grass, his tiny tail wagging with excitement. She reached down to gently pat his head, feeling the soft fur beneath her fingers. The park was full of happy sounds, children laughing, birds singing, and the distant hum of conversations. It was the kind of afternoon that made everything feel peaceful. But that peace was about to be interrupted. A woman, dressed in a neatly pressed blouse and expensive-looking sunglasses, stood a short distance away. She had been watching Lily and Buddy for a while, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her expression wasn't friendly. It was more like she was trying to find something wrong with what she was seeing. After a few moments, she walked closer, her heels clicking against the pavement. She stopped a few feet away and cleared her throat loudly, as if demanding attention. Maria, who had been chatting with the elderly woman, turned her head. She saw the woman standing there with a stiff posture and an impatient look on her face. Maria had seen people like her before, people who always had something to complain about. The woman pointed at Buddy. "Excuse me," she said in a sharp voice. "Dogs aren't allowed in this park. You need to take that animal out of here." Maria blinked, taken aback by the sudden demand. She glanced at Lily, who was looking up with wide eyes, and then back at the woman. "Oh, he's a service dog," Maria explained politely. "He's allowed here." The woman scoffed, shaking her head. "I don't think so. I've been coming to this park for years, and I'd never seen dogs running around near the playground." She pointed toward a nearby sign. "See, no pets allowed." Maria sighed, keeping her voice calm. Service dogs are different. The law allows them in public spaces, including parks. But the woman didn't seem interested in listening. She let out a dramatic sigh, as if she were deeply inconvenienced. I don't think that's true. I'm going to call someone who can handle this. Lily's small hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair. Buddy isn't doing anything wrong, she said softly. The woman didn't respond. Instead, she pulled out her phone and started dialing. Maria clenched her jaw, frustration bubbling inside her, but she didn't want to argue. People like this woman rarely listen to reason. She had dealt with rude strangers before, people who thought they knew everything. Still, she never got used to the way they treated Lily like an outsider. Within minutes, 2 uniformed officers appeared at the entrance of the park. They walked with purpose, their eyes scanning the area before stopping near the woman. She waved them over, her expression full of self-importance. "There," she said, pointing at Lily and Buddy. "That dog is not supposed to be here. I told them, but they refused to leave." The officers turned their attention toward Maria and Lily. Their expressions were unreadable, but something about their approach made Maria's stomach tighten. Lily instinctively reached for Buddy, pulling him close. Maria took a deep breath. She had a feeling this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. The 2 officers walked toward Maria and Lily with steady, serious steps. The peaceful atmosphere of the park seemed to shift as people nearby paused their conversations and glanced over. Some parents pulled their children a little closer, sensing the tension in the air. Maria sat up straighter on the bench, already feeling uneasy. She knew there was no reason to worry. Buddy was a legally recognized service dog, but something about the way the officers looked at her made her stomach twist. Lily, still holding onto Buddy, looked up at her mother with confused eyes. One of the officers, a tall man with a sharp voice, stopped in front of them. His name tag read Daniels. The other officer, a little younger and quieter, stood beside him. His name tag said Mitchell. Daniels glanced at the woman who had called them, the one now standing proudly as if she had done something important. "Ma'am, you said there was an issue here," he asked. "Yes." The woman nodded quickly, pointing at Lily's small dog. "That animal isn't supposed to be in the park. I told them, but they refused to leave." Maria took a slow breath before speaking. "Buddy is a service dog," she said in a calm but firm voice. "He's allowed here. The law protects service animals in public spaces." Officer Daniels looked down at Buddy, then at Lily, who was gripping her armrest tightly. His expression didn't soften. "Do you have paperwork for the dog?" he asked. Maria frowned. "Service dogs aren't required to have special papers," she said. "That's not how the law works." Daniels crossed his arms, unimpressed. "Well, if you can't prove it, we're going to have to ask you to leave." Lily's small voice piped up, nervous but determined. "Buddy helps me. He's my friend." The younger officer, Mitchell, hesitated for a moment, his eyes shifting between the little girl and his partner. He didn't say anything, but Maria noticed the slight uncertainty on his face. Maybe he wasn't as sure about this situation as Daniels was. Maria clenched her jaw. "Officer, with all due respect, you're making a mistake," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The Americans with Disabilities Act protects people like my daughter. You cannot remove us from a public place just because someone doesn't like seeing a service dog." Daniels narrowed his eyes. "Ma'am, I'm not here to argue about the law. If someone calls in a complaint, we have to respond. Now, I'll ask again. Do you have proof that this is a real service dog?" Maria felt anger bubbling inside her, but she kept her voice controlled. "I don't need to carry proof. It's not required." Daniels let out a sigh, clearly growing impatient. "If you don't cooperate, we might have to issue a citation," he warned. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "We didn't do anything wrong," she whispered, her small hands gripping Buddy's fur. Maria put a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Officer, you are harassing a child," she said, her voice now firm. Daniels didn't back down. "I'm just doing my job. But what neither he nor the woman who called him realized was that they weren't the only ones watching. And soon, they were going to regret their actions. Lily sniffled, holding Buddy close as the officer's serious eyes stared down at her. Maria could feel her daughter's small body trembling, and that broke her heart. She had spent years teaching Lily to be strong, to believe in herself, but how could a child stand up to something like this? Maria tightened her grip on Lily's wheelchair, keeping her voice steady. "Officer, my daughter is scared. She hasn't done anything wrong. Neither has Buddy." Officer Daniels didn't seem to care. He crossed his arms and shook his head. "Ma'am, I've asked you nicely. Either you show me proof that this is a real service dog, or you're going to have to leave." Before Maria could respond, the woman who had called the police, Karen, stepped forward again, looking pleased with herself. "I knew it. I knew they didn't have the proper paperwork," she said loudly. "Some people just think they can break the rules." Maria's patience was wearing thin. She looked at Karen with disbelief. "You don't know anything about us," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "You don't know what my daughter has been through, and you don't know the law." Karen scoffed, folding her arms. "I know that dogs shouldn't be in parks." Lily wiped her eyes and looked up at the officers. "Buddy helps me when I feel scared. He picks up things for me. He makes me feel safe." Her voice was quiet but full of emotion. Officer Mitchell shifted uncomfortably. It was clear that he was starting to feel uneasy about the situation. He glanced at Daniels as if waiting for him to reconsider. But Daniels only sighed and pulled out a small notepad. "All right," he said. "If you're refusing to leave, I'll have to issue a citation." Maria felt her hands tremble with frustration. A citation? For what? Sitting in the park with her disabled daughter. This was beyond unfair. A few parkgoers had stopped to watch what was happening. Some parents stood near the playground, whispering to each other. A man sitting on a nearby bench had pulled out his phone and was recording. A woman jogging by had slowed down, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. Maria saw this, and a small spark of hope flickered inside her. People were watching. That meant the truth was being seen. But before she could say anything, Daniels took another step forward, lowering his voice. "Listen, lady, I don't have all day. Either you cooperate, or we'll have to take further action." Lily gasped, hugging Buddy tightly. "Please don't take him away." Maria's heart broke. She had never seen her daughter so scared. But just then, a deep, calm voice cut through the air. "Excuse me, officers," the voice said. "I think you need to stop right there." Maria turned toward the sound. A tall man in a suit stood near a shaded part of the park, watching everything with sharp, knowing eyes. And at that moment, everything began to change. The air in the park suddenly felt different. The moment the deep, firm voice spoke, everyone's attention shifted. Even Officer Daniels, who had been so confident just moments ago, hesitated slightly before turning to see who had interrupted. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and a neatly pressed suit stepped forward. His face was calm but serious, and there was something about the way he carried himself that made people stop and take notice. He wasn't just another curious bystander. He looked like someone important. Officer Mitchell straightened up immediately, as if he recognized the man. Daniels, however, still looked annoyed. "Sir, this is a private matter," he said, his voice a little less firm than before. "We're handling a complaint." The man walked closer, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. The scared little girl in a wheelchair, the trembling service dog, the upset mother, and the phone in Daniel's hand with a half-written citation. Finally, he looked at Karen, who suddenly seemed far less confident than before. "Handling a complaint." The man raised an eyebrow. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're harassing a disabled child and her legally protected service dog." Maria felt a flicker of hope. Who was this man? And why did he sound like he knew exactly what was going on? Daniels frowned. "Sir, I don't know who you are, but—" The man held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "My name is Judge Robert Ellison," he said, his voice calm but strong. "And I happen to know quite a bit about the law, including the fact that what you're doing right now is completely wrong." A quiet murmur spread through the small crowd that had gathered. Some people gasped, others whispered to each other. Even Maria felt her heart race. A judge, right here in the park. Officer Mitchell's face turned pale, and even Daniels shifted uncomfortably. "A judge," Daniels muttered under his breath. Judge Ellison nodded. "That's right. And as a federal judge, I take the Americans with Disabilities Act very seriously." He looked directly at Daniels. "You do know what that is, don't you?" Daniels cleared his throat, suddenly looking much less sure of himself. "Of course I do. But we received a complaint about the dog." "A false complaint," Judge Ellison interrupted. "Service dogs are legally allowed in public spaces. No one is required to carry papers or proof, and questioning someone like this, especially a child, could be seen as discrimination." Karen, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. "But I was just." Judge Ellison turned his gaze toward her, and she immediately closed her mouth. Maria couldn't believe what she was seeing. A complete stranger had stepped in, and now everything was changing. Lily, still holding Buddy, looked up at the judge with wide eyes. Ellison turned back to the officers. "Now, if you don't want to deal with a serious legal issue, I suggest you step back, apologize, and let this little girl enjoy her day." Silence hung in the air. Daniels clenched his jaw. But for the first time since he arrived, he didn't have a response. For a moment, no one spoke. The park, which had been filled with laughter and chatter earlier, now felt completely silent. Officer Daniels' face was tense, his fingers gripping the notepad in his hand. His confidence from before had vanished, and now he seemed unsure of what to do. Officer Mitchell, on the other hand, looked like he wanted to disappear. His eyes flickered between Judge Ellison and Daniels, as if he was waiting for permission to step away from the situation. Judge Ellison kept his calm expression, his sharp eyes locked onto Daniels. "Well," he asked, his voice steady, "are you going to do the right thing, or do I need to make a phone call?" Daniels cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. He knew he had no choice now. A federal judge was standing right in front of him, watching every move he made. If he pushed any further, this could turn into something much worse for him. Finally, after what felt like forever, Daniels let out a small sigh and stuffed his notepad back into his pocket. "There's no need for that," he muttered. Then, without looking at Maria or Lily, he added, "You're free to stay." Maria felt a wave of relief rush over her. She placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, giving her a reassuring squeeze. Her little girl had been so scared, but now everything was okay again. Lily, still holding Buddy tightly, looked up at the judge. "Thank you," she said softly. Judge Ellison smiled kindly at her. "You don't have to thank me, sweetheart. You have every right to be here." Karen, who had been silent for a while, suddenly crossed her arms. "But that still doesn't change the fact that dogs shouldn't be in the park." Judge Ellison turned his sharp gaze toward her, cutting her off mid-sentence. "Are you a lawyer?" he asked. Karen blinked, caught off guard. "No, but—" "Then I suggest you stop talking about laws you don't understand," he said simply. His voice wasn't rude, but it was firm. Karen's face turned red, and she quickly clamped her mouth shut. Some of the people watching chuckled quietly. A few even started clapping, as if they were silently cheering for Maria and Lily. Daniels, clearly embarrassed, turned to Officer Mitchell. "Come on," he muttered, already walking away. Mitchell followed quickly, clearly relieved to be leaving. As soon as they were gone, Maria let out a deep breath. She turned to Judge Ellison, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't even know what to say. You didn't have to step in, but you did. Thank you." Judge Ellison waved a hand. "I did what any decent person should do," he said. Then, glancing at Lily and Buddy, he added, "And I hope you both enjoy the rest of your day." With that, he gave them one last kind smile and walked away, leaving Maria and Lily to finally breathe easy. The nightmare was over, but what had happened that day would never be forgotten. As the officers walked away, the tension in the park slowly faded. The people who had gathered to watch the scene unfold began whispering among themselves. Some smiled at Maria and Lily, offering silent support. A few parents gave Karen disapproving looks before turning back to their children, happy that the situation had been resolved. Maria bent down next to Lily, brushing a few loose strands of hair from her daughter's face. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked softly. Lily nodded, though her eyes were still a little watery. She hugged Buddy close, pressing her cheek against his fur. "I was scared," she admitted, "but I'm okay now." Maria's heart ached at those words. Her little girl should never have been put in such a situation, but she was proud of how brave Lily had been. Nearby, Karen still stood with her arms crossed, looking frustrated. She huffed, clearly upset that things hadn't gone the way she wanted. "This is ridiculous," she muttered under her breath before turning and stomping away. A man who had been sitting on a bench nearby spoke up. "Guess she didn't get what she wanted," he said with a chuckle. Another woman, who had been recording the whole situation, nodded. "And I'm glad she didn't. That was just wrong." Maria looked around and realized that many people had seen what happened. Some had filmed the entire thing. She knew that this moment would not be forgotten. And maybe that was a good thing. Maybe it would remind people to stand up for what was right. A woman with short brown hair and kind eyes approached Maria and Lily. "I just wanted to say I'm so sorry you had to go through that," she said. "Your daughter is very brave." Maria smiled. "Thank you." The woman crouched down to Lily's level. "And you, young lady, have a wonderful friend in Buddy," she said warmly. "He's lucky to have you." Lily's face lit up with a small smile as she nodded. "I'm lucky to have him too." Buddy wagged his tail happily, sensing that things were better now. Maria took a deep breath, feeling lighter than she had just moments ago. "I think it's time for some ice cream," she said, giving Lily a playful nudge. "What do you think?" Lily giggled. "Yes. Can Buddy have some too?" Maria laughed. "Maybe just a little." As they turned to leave, Maria glanced back at the park one last time. The sun was still shining, the children were still playing, and life had gone back to normal. But she knew that today had been important. Today, people had seen what was right and wrong. And most importantly, Lily had learned that even in the face of unfairness, there are always good people willing to stand up for what's right. As Maria and Lily walked toward the ice cream stand, the warm sunlight felt comforting. Buddy trotted beside them, his tail wagging as if he knew that everything was okay now. Maria couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. It had been a difficult moment, but in the end, kindness and justice had won. When they reached the small ice cream cart, Maria knelt next to Lily. "All right, sweetheart, what flavor are you getting?" Lily tapped her chin, pretending to think hard. "I think I'd want chocolate," she said with a grin. "And maybe a little vanilla for Buddy." Maria chuckled. "All right, one chocolate and a tiny vanilla for Buddy." She turned to the vendor and placed the order. As they waited, a few people who had seen the incident earlier approached them. A young mother with a baby on her hip smiled warmly. "I just wanted to say that your daughter is incredible," she said. "She handled everything so bravely." Maria smiled back. "Thank you. She's stronger than she knows." The woman nodded. "And I hope you know that a lot of us were on your side today. What happened back there? It wasn't right. But I'm so glad that Judge stepped in when he did." Maria felt a wave of gratitude. "Me too," she admitted. "I don't even know how to thank him." Another man, the one who had been recording earlier, spoke up. "Don't worry," he said, holding up his phone. "The world is going to see what happened. People need to know that things like this still happen and that we all need to do better." Maria wasn't sure how to feel about that, but she understood his point. If sharing their experience could help prevent another child from being treated unfairly, then maybe it was a good thing. Just then, The vendor handed Lily her ice cream cone, and she squealed with happiness. "Thank you," she said cheerfully. Maria took the small vanilla cup for Buddy, who licked it excitedly, making Lily giggle. As they sat on a nearby bench, enjoying their treat, Maria looked at her daughter with pride. "You know, Lily," she said gently, "what happened today was tough. But do you know what I saw?" Lily licked her ice cream and looked up. "What?" "I saw you being brave," Maria said. "I saw people standing up for what was right. And I saw that even when bad things happen, there are always good people willing to help." Lily thought for a moment, then smiled. "Like the judge?" Maria nodded. "Exactly." Lily looked down at Buddy, who was happily finishing his tiny cup of ice cream. "And like Buddy, he helps me too." Maria kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Yes, sweetheart. And no matter what happens, we'll always have people who care about us." Lily grinned and held up her ice cream cone. "Then today is a good day." Maria smiled. "Yes, it is." And with that, they enjoyed their ice cream, knowing that no matter what challenges came their way, they would always have each other and the kindness of strangers to help them through. 1/2.